Welcome to the What Bitcoin Did podcast.
Hello there, how are you all? Welcome to the 100th episode of the What Bitcoin Did podcast, which is brought to you by Kraken. 100 episodes, amazing really. And seeing as it's Lightning Month, I'm pretty chuffed to have the co-author of the Lightning white paper, Tadge Dryja, for this episode. But before I talk about that, I do have a message from my show sponsors. So Kraken, it's the only exchange I use now for my Bitcoin, and I've been using them for a couple of months now. I do all my buys, all my sells, and my rebalancing for the WBD books on Kraken. And yeah, massive fan of them, massive fan of the team, and I'm a massive fan of the direction they are taking. With all the problems with exchanges, hacks, and exit scams, I do love their focus on security, and I'm going to be working with their Chief Security Officer, Nick Pacocco, on bringing some personal security-based content after consensus, so keep an eye out for that. And also, I'm going to be speaking with their lead product designer about UX, my experience, and some of the things they're going to be working on there. So hopefully I'll be able to tell you about some of that soon. But yes, Kraken, super engaged, 100% focused on the customer, love them, and based on their ethics and the support of the industry, they're the only exchange I will be using. And if you want to support Kraken, head over to kraken.com, which is kraken.com. That is kraken.com, kraken.com. And BlockFi, yes, I signed up for one of their interest accounts this week. They've now got 53 million of client crypto under management, which is pretty amazing, and I decided to put 20% of my Bitcoin in. Put in my Bitcoin where my mouth is, and I can't wait till the end of the month to get my statement to see how my Bitcoin is working for me. And yes, this is a trusted service. And yes, I absolutely understand people's points where they say not your keys, not your Bitcoin, but I've done my research. I trust the team, I trust the product, and I'm willing to put 20% of my Bitcoin in there, earning interest for me. If you want to check this out, if you're interested in trying out for yourself, head over to blockfi.com, which is blockfi.com. That is blockfi.com, which is blockfi.com. And lastly, we've got Consensus coming up. How many of you are heading out to New York for this? I was there last year, looking forward to it, looking forward to catching up with some old friends. And I'm also working with the team at Consensus to produce a special WBD show from one of the stages of the event, which I will be announcing soon. Looking forward to watching some great Bitcoin talks, particularly looking forward to John Carvalho, Christian Decker, and Alex Gladstein, who have all actually been on the podcast, which is pretty cool. If you haven't been before, it is a great event for networking. There's also a 2-day hackathon, and there's going to be parties galore on in the town. A great chance to meet people, make some new friends as well. And they've also got a special discount for listeners of the podcast. So if you fancy going to Consensus and you want $300 off, then head over to consensus2019.com. That is consensus with a U, CONSENSUS 2019.com, and use the discount code BitcoinDid300. Okay, so we're on episode 100. Sorry for the slightly long intro, because I do want to say some thanks to people, really. It's kind of amazing, really, actually. So it was about 18 months ago, I was in LA, and I kind of had this idea to do a podcast, so I reached out to my buddy Luke Martin. He was there. I said to him what I was thinking. He was like, cool, he was up for it, so I went onto Amazon, bought all the equipment, took an Uber over to his, and had a beer with him and recorded episode 1. Now, 18 months on, over 100 shows, over 1.2 million downloads. I've traveled the world. I've met some amazing people, made some new friends for life. And yes, I feel really blessed to do this. And I'm grateful to so many people. So I just do want to say a couple of thank yous. Firstly, my man, Rich Roll. He's the person who gave me the inspiration to do this. He's been such a good friend over the years. So thank you, Rich. He's also got an amazing podcast. So definitely go and check that out. A big shout out to Luke for agreeing to do this and just being a cool friend over the time I've been doing this. Every single guest who's come on, who's taken the time out of their schedule to be on the show, thank you so much. To all my sponsors who make this happen, specifically BlockFi and Kraken, and more recently Dropbit, your long-term deals allow me to do this, so thank you so much for that. And yeah, anyone who's reviewed the show, shared it with their friends, listened, argued with me on Twitter, anyone's done anything, I just want to say a massive thank you. It's really changed my life. It's really changed my children's lives, so thank you so much. Can't wait to do some more shows. Thank you. And yeah, with episode 100 and seeing as we're in Lightning Month, I think it's pretty cool that I got Tadge Dryja on the show. He was the co-author of the Lightning white paper. It's not the interview I expected. We discussed a whole bunch of things. We included the limitations of Lightning. We also discussed the potential. We talk about block size, inflation, fees, like a whole bunch of subjects that you would say are possibly controversial, but I did really enjoy the conversation. I got a lot out of it. I hope you did too. You know, as ever, if you've got any questions, you can reach out to me. My email address is hello@whatbitcoindid.com. If you want to support the show, head over to whatbitcoindid.com, click on the support section, and I do want to say a big thank you to my patron top tier sponsor, Rise Wallet. It's a new way into Bitcoin. There are no sign-ups, you just scan the card and you are holding Bitcoin. Head over to risewallet.com to find out more. And yeah, I hope you enjoy the show. Thank you to everyone who supported me in getting to this 100th episode. Tadge, man, how are you?
I'm good.
Finally got the sound sorted.
Yeah, good old computers.
Well, listen, look, thanks for coming on. I've been running a lightning month on the podcast. I actually just missed you at MIT at the Bitcoin conference.
Were you at the expo?
Yeah, I was there. So I interviewed Christian there and interviewed Jack Mallers, and I tried to find you at one point, and I seem to have missed you. So apologies for that.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was there both days, but tons of people I didn't know.
Yeah. So anyway, thanks for coming on. I've been running this lightning month, been interviewing lots of people, finding out as much as I can about lightning. Just to prepare you, I am not the most technical person, and my podcast is approached from that angle to try and learn about it. And so there's been loads happening. I've got lots to talk to you about, loads of questions. But really, I kind of want to just go back a bit, because obviously you wrote the Lightning white paper, and I had a conversation with Christian about that, and he had a competing white paper. Can you give me the background to how you came to actually start writing that?
So it was with Joseph Poon, and we met up in like San Francisco Bitcoin meetups, like 2014. And we knew the general idea has been sort of, payment channels and stuff. But the idea, the core idea of like what would then become HDLCs, was really something Joseph came up with when we were talking about it. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. The idea of, don't use signatures, actually just use like hashes and pre-images so that when you reveal it, everyone can see it. And then once we started writing it, it was like, there were other people looking at the similar kind of things. Alex Axelrod had a paper or like a page on GitHub with some types of similar ideas. So we talked to him as well. And Joseph, I don't know if Joseph really wanted to publish it. So it sort of didn't go anywhere really. We were just sort of like brainstorming for several months. And then it was like, there's a paper from BitPay called Impulse. And that was like, we saw that and I was like, oh no, this doesn't work at all. Joseph was like, okay, now we have to really publish this and like actually get this out there because people are going to come up with stuff that doesn't work as well. So that was, and then there was sort of like, okay, let's, give a talk at SF Bitcoin Devs and have like a paper out. And so that was sort of the process there.
I mean, it's a huge white paper. I read it, well, I'd say I attempted to read it. I mean, not a technical person. I would say the first few pages were a lot more interesting to me than like the in-depth technical bits. But how long did it take to pull together?
Couple months. It was a bit of a, it was just like a Google Doc kind of thing. And also we didn't like agree on like everything necessary, like Joseph and I. So even some of the terms and like diagrams are like, oh, well, okay, fine. So we're working on it together. But yeah, it's not the greatest paper, I guess. I mean, it's a good idea, but, and it's really hard to revise because everyone's sort of gone their own separate ways. And so it's just sort of this paper that's mostly finished. It's like on this lightning.network domain, which I don't know. I guess Joseph still has that domain, but I don't know.
And I guess you therefore see the white paper really as a starting point, which is a real fair point with regards to, say, the arguments over the original white paper for Bitcoin, where people have used that as a reason to stick to an original vision. You just see it as a starting point.
Yeah, I mean, it's a starting point, but also it was, everyone involved had pretty different ideas of how it would work. So like in the paper, I don't think there's anything about onion routing. I don't think there's anything about a lot of stuff. Like almost all of the HDLC multi-hop stuff is just sort of hand waves. It's like, yeah, you could make HDLCs. And my thinking for how to actually then develop and deploy it was, we'll start with just regular channels, start with no multi-hop functionality at all, and get people using channels, and then start to extend that into multi-hop HDLC kind of stuff. That's not really what's happened. But just because the HDLC stuff was like a bit less developed, in that, the HDLC, the general structure works, but there's still all these questions about fees and about, how routing's really going to work. So I think it can work, but to me it was like, okay, let's start with like the core channels that are, bidirectional and indefinite duration, and that stuff's really great. And then like work our way from there. But that's not really what happened, I guess.
And how much time did you spend wrestling with different ideas for scaling? Because one of the things that stood out in the white paper to me is that I'm just going to quote you. It says, while it is possible that Moore's law will continue indefinitely and the computational capacity for nodes to cost effectively compute multi-gigabyte blocks may exist in the future, it's not a certainty. So I'm guessing you wrestled with on-chain scaling.
Yeah, well, so let's see. The stuff I'm working on now, so I'm not really actively working on Lightning and haven't been for almost 6 months, 9 months, a year. So the thing I'm working on now, this Utreexo accumulator, I guess you'd call it on-chain or layer one scaling, kind of, in that it doesn't use payment channels, and it is a way to reduce the size and increase the scalability of full nodes. So it wasn't like, we want channels. Channels certainly have limitations in comparison with just regular on-chain transactions, because you have to have these sort of persistent relationships. But it was a general idea of, and even when we were working on it, it was like, oh, this is a little bit of a mess. This is sort of like NAT for Bitcoin, network address translation on the internet, which is kind of a hack, but it makes the internet work, and it's like, okay, well, this is a little bit of a hack. It's not the cleanest design because you've got these persistent channel relationships and like routing and stuff versus like the regular Bitcoin layer one, which is just everything can immediately, directly connect. But yeah, so it's not like a ideological thing. It's like, well, how can we get this to scale? And in retrospect, like the technical limitation, so Moore's law, yeah, it does seem kind of dead. But it's not even the technical limitations. There's like long-term concerns with the fee market and stuff. So a lot of the debate when the block size scaling stuff was going on was about, how fast can a computer do this? But I think an even more tricky question is, okay, let's say you have an amazing computer and, Moore's like, there's some new discovery and computers are 100 times faster. Does that mean you should say, okay, yeah, we'll have, huge block size, no real limitations? Because long term, when the block reward disappears, there's a lot of problems that happen when there aren't fees. So I think that's an even harder concern than like technical limitations.
So I've come into quite a few criticisms of Lightning as well, and some of them I'm going to raise with you, and it'd be interesting to get your feedback. But also, I wasn't aware that you are working on a separate project for kind of like an on-chain scaling thing. Can you explain what that is that you just mentioned?
Sure. There's a GitHub. So the paper is still not public. I need to clean it up and make the citations and diagrams. But the code is on GitHub. It's called Utreexo. And I gave a talk about it at the MIT Bitcoin Expo. So there's a little video or slides there, I think. And the idea is you take this hash-based accumulator, and instead of storing, so right now in Bitcoin, you run a full node, you download the whole blockchain, and you store the entire set of UTXOs, which are like sort of where the Bitcoins live. And that's about three something gigabytes right now. There's about 60 million different sort of coins. And when you store all that on your hard drive or your SSD, and it's kind of slow and it's kind of big. So the idea of Utreexo is you don't store it at all. You store this little Merkle tree-like representation of it. And then when someone wants to spend a coin, they prove that the coin exists. And then you verify that. So you can run a full node. It is like, there probably will be, I'm sure with Utreexo, people are going to start arguing and debating and stuff. I don't know if like the Bitcoin Cash crowd will hate it. Who knows? But I argue that it's a full node in that it fully verifies all the signatures. It has, fully verifies every state transition in the system. But it doesn't have the UTXO itself. So it needs people to give proofs. And that is the main downside. And those proofs do take up space. So you have to download more, but you have to store less. And I think in many cases, it's a lot faster and easier. So that's the thing I'm working on now. I haven't really been working on Lightning since last summer. I still sort of participate. Like I went to there's an Australian sort of Lightning meetup, but I have my own implementation that sort of uses, or I haven't looked at, lit, and it doesn't comply with the Bolt spec. There's a lot of things that I argued against in the Bolt spec. I'm like, no, don't do this. And then part of it is because I'm like, oh, I sort of made this, so like I should have a say. But then there's like a bunch of other developers and they're doing it their way. So it's like, all right, I don't know.
Right.
So, yeah.
So why did you step back from working on Lightning?
Oh, a lot of it was just, it was frustrating. And I saw that like they're going with their Bolt spec, and that's, there's a bunch of teams with lots of money behind that. So,
do you mind if we talk about this?
Sure, yeah.
So I've interviewed a couple of people who've had criticisms. One of them I took a lot of stick for, but I interviewed Peter Risen. And the reason I interviewed Peter Risen is, despite what everyone says about him, I don't believe it's binary that 100% of what he says is wrong. And also, I wanted to hear from somebody who I kind of feel like wants Lightning to fail, so they're really going to look at it. And I also spoke to Dan Robinson, I think somebody who's a bit more respected and rational. And they both came with a lot of criticisms, which I find it hard to technically argue against, but at the same time concern me. So I'm going to jump forward a bit. Let's talk about some of those things. Firstly, one of the things that Peter talked about was that Lightning scales transactions and not users. And he has a problem that if you're scaling transactions and not users, if Bitcoin was to rapidly grow, you would still have a problem onboarding enough people, because say the limit is 250,000 people a day and there was a sudden influx, that's going to push up the network fees. So he said that doesn't solve that problem at all.
I mean, I guess, yeah, it doesn't. It helps a lot. I mean, none of these, I don't think you can claim. So the problem with Lightning, so like when we did Lightning Labs and we're pitching to VCs, from my perspective as an engineer, I mainly focus on the limitations, because that's what engineering is. It's these trade-offs and limitations, and I'm not good at like pitching it and being like, hey, this is going to solve all the problems. And that was a source of sort of tension when like Joseph would say, this can scale to billions of transactions a second. I'm like, dude, come on. No, it can't. Like that. Where are you getting that number? And it's like, maybe you could come up with ideas where it does, but it's just like, doesn't seem realistic. So I would never want to pitch Lightning as, oh, this will scale, this solves everything. And I'm pretty sure there's like a video of me giving a talk at SF Bitcoin Devs in 2015 fall, I think, where I was sort of saying like, in the future, if you have these, 1 megabyte, whatever, restricted block size and Lightning Network, it's still, rich people and companies can all use Lightning, but the average user probably can't. So I don't think you can just say, okay, we have Lightning, like we're done at all.
Right. Okay. So then that kind of echoes another point or concern I've had, whereby it feels like potentially Bitcoin becomes a two-tier system where the base chain is for the Bitcoin rich or people who've invested early, have a lot of Bitcoin, or companies. Yet, say somebody new wants to start using Bitcoin in, maybe it's 10 years, 20 years. They probably can't afford to use the base chain because the fees might be too high, and therefore they're forced to use Lightning only. And also, if they're only using Lightning, are Lightning Bitcoins different from Bitcoin base chain Bitcoins? Are we saying the base chain is more secure? I kind of got wrapped up in that. Is that kind of your thinking too?
So those parts I don't have as much concern about. In that it's not. I don't think it's realistic that you'll have like, oh, I have this Lightning channel and I'm stuck in it and I can't use it and switch to something else, because your fees may become significant, and it may be the equivalent of $20. We saw $20 fees like a year and a half ago, and so then you'll have people who have channels open who do transactions, and it could be a pain point. But I don't think you're ever going to have a channel where you're really stuck in it and you can't move to another provider. It may be a pain and it may be costly. So yeah, but I think it's more likely that if someone's like, look, the fees for this are really expensive, I'm just not going to use Bitcoin or Lightning at all. Because if you don't have Lightning, it seems like it's going to be even worse, right? It moves a lot of transactions onto the Lightning network, which then makes room for higher value transactions, such as opening channels on the main network.
Well, that goes on to the other point, is that Peter was saying that friction from layer 1 bleeds onto layer 2. So if we get to the point where we have high transaction fees on the base chain, then you're going to have high fees for opening up a channel. And obviously you have 2 transactions, or is it 3 transactions to open a channel? I can't remember, but
to open should just be 1.
Yeah.
But then to close is another, and potentially more than 1.
So say if it's $20, if you open up a channel and it's a $20 fee, you have to do enough transactions in that to cover $20 to make it efficient. And you also run the risk that somebody closes that channel on you and you lose your fee. And he also said the other thing is that as fees go up, your channel balance will go down because it has to cover the fee for if the channel closes.
Potentially, yeah. So fees. So actually, in the like Australia meeting, it was just all about fee. Well, I think it was Chatham House rules, so I shouldn't say who said this, but it was kind of funny. And someone would just like be working on their laptop, look back, oh, we're still talking about fees, and just like go back. So the problem is it's quite complex to deal with fees. And I would say Lightning only matters really when you have significant fees, because if fees are basically nothing, just use the main chain. It's free. Like, yeah, you have to wait 10 minutes. But well, I wouldn't say that. I think the real interesting thing is there are really good use cases for payment channels, even when fees are extremely low. Like, well, they're not quite super low right now, but they're variable right now, and sometimes they're very low and sometimes they're not. So such as like an exchange. To me, that seems like the first real great use case where you don't even need HDLCs. You just say, I'm going to open a payment channel with, Gemini or whatever, and my coins are on my side of the channel, and when I sell them, they go onto your side of the channel. And so if Gemini gets hacked, I don't care, right? I have custody of everything that's on my side of the order book. And you don't even need HDLCs for that necessarily, and that takes a lot of the risk. So I know Arwin is a company that Ethan Hellman's doing with Sharon, and that's in Boston, and they're doing something sort of like that, but for cross-chain swaps. But I think even before cross-chain swaps, it's just like, why is there a deposit button? There should be a channel button, right? A deposit's already an on-chain transaction, but and you withdraw is going to be another on-chain transaction. There's almost no increase in size for that kind of thing. So that seems like the first real easy use case that's like a total win. And I don't really see any exchanges using that. So who knows? Maybe they will soon.
Yeah, so that makes sense. But when I start to think about it in terms of, say, a store wanting to sell a whole bunch of things, I start to think, well, am I going to be doing that many purchases? Do I need my channel open for that long? Also, in terms of the store, they have to have liquidity. They have to actually lock up liquidity to support people. And I'm starting to think, that doesn't make sense. And then if the fees go up on the base chain, I don't know, it starts to become a problem for me. The place I've seen it that I did quite like it, and it's a custodial solution, but the tipping.me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's quite neat. So for my work, I get people give me tips. Over the last 2 months, I've had, say, $400 in tips. Now, some of them break down to like 100 sats or 1,000 sats, but they all add up. And at the end of each month, I can withdraw it.
So that's one of my big problems with the Bolt specification and the implementations, in that like you can't actually do 100 Satoshi HDLCs.
No.
And I'm like, and so and like I generally like the people working on these things, and I understand why, but I feel like it's dangerous because I saw this in Bitcoin in like 2013, 2014, mostly 2013, where you got a lot of hype and people thought it could do everything. And people were saying, Bitcoin, it's trustless, it's free, it's instant, everyone in the world can use it and send money anywhere instantly. And the actual people working on, the engineers are like, whoa, wait, it's not free, it's not instant, here's all these restrictions. But that gets drowned out by the sort of euphoric, like, this is amazing thing. And you don't want to like be the sort of rain on people's parade. And I feel like I worry about that with Lightning, where you're saying, oh, we can send 1 Satoshi anywhere. And it's like, well, wait, there's a qualitative difference in sending, a half a Bitcoin payment through these channels and or I guess I don't know if you do that, but like these really small ones are sort of trimmed, and you can't actually make HDLCs that small. So you end up sort of trusting. It's a different way of trust. I don't know. So that's sort of something that's weird. Like where people on Twitter have like little Lightning stuff in their name, and it's just like weird. And I'm sort of like, yes, Lightning is really cool. It's a really powerful technology. I've been working on it for years. But at the same time, like, it's just weird seeing it become sort of this like hype thing. And I sort of like, I don't want to be, hyping it that way.
So you think it's overhyped, and it's almost just like a tool, a much smaller part of the ecosystem with smaller edge cases than people are expecting.
I mean, yeah, I think it can be very useful for a lot of things, but not everything. It's not a silver bullet. There's still plenty of issues. Even if Lightning works great, there's tons of issues left to solve in Bitcoin. And, but it's still great to work on. And it's, I don't want to discourage it or say bad things about it, of course. And I definitely don't want to like play into the it's just gotten very like, I don't know, tribal kind of thing where like, oh, these people like Lightning and these people like this other thing. And it's like, wait, I don't know. So it's weird, right?
Well, no, I get it. It is weird. So I got a lot of stick for agreeing to do the interview with Peter Risen. And the tribal thing does come into play, because what happens is that I come across difficulties in Lightning and I start to monitor other criticisms, and I see a real firm defense of the criticisms, and I don't see much open kind of acceptance that maybe some of the criticisms are correct. And it comes with insults and attacks. And I started to have a little bit of sympathy with some of the people who are proponents for on-chain scaling. And again, I see all the criticisms for that. And trying to navigate between the two and have sympathy for both sides and try and understand their perspective becomes really difficult. And I'll just add one more thing, is that I do not believe that every single person who is a proponent of on-chain scaling, and by the way, I don't own any Bitcoin Cash, but I don't believe they are all scammers. And I don't believe they are all technically incompetent. I believe they think they have a solution. And I have those sympathies, but trying to express those sympathies usually comes with some form of attack that you're technically incompetent or you don't understand economics. Do you understand that?
Yeah, so that is a big part of the problem, is that it's become people just yelling and insulting each other, and not like what, because I don't, even the people who I work with mostly are Bitcoin Core developers. So Corey Fields works at the MIT DCI. The lead maintainer of Bitcoin Core, Vladimir, he's an employee of DCI. We don't interact with him that much. He's sort of off in Europe and he does his own thing and manages it. But I generally agree with these people. And yeah, the goal is, it's tricky though, because like I've talked to Peter Wool and he's like, yeah, I don't think everyone can use Bitcoin, right? We don't know how to make that happen. We want to, but there's a lot of issues, of problems. And the general thing is, it's preferable for it to be sort of this small thing that still maintains the security than for it to become this big thing that loses those properties and becomes more like, gets diluted into something like PayPal. So that's sort of a choice. Like, but I think most people agree, like, yeah, we want more people to use it. And I think a huge argument is a lot of people paying small fees feels a lot more sustainable than a few people paying large fees, right? And that seems like a much better system. But there's technical issues, which Utreexo, the thing I'm working on now, that I'm not going to argue to anyone that like, hey, now you can increase the block size because look, like it's totally feasible to have a giant UTXO set. Like, I'm not going to start that argument, of course. I think it may long-term lead to that, where it's like, hey, look, our computers are better. We are, there is robust transaction demand, and we've got these scaling solutions. So yeah, increase the block size, or hard forks are tricky. So maybe some kind of extension block, who knows? But yeah, I think these all have to happen in concert. And I think most of the Bitcoin Core developers have said that. It's weird, like where it became this very polarized thing. And I sort of have ideas of why this happened, but it became, initially a lot of people who are still working on Bitcoin Core have said like, yeah, we should do a block size increase. And then with SegWit, it was a block size increase, but then wasn't seen as one. And I remember Peter Wool's talk at Scaling Bitcoin in Hong Kong, and that was like this sort of SegWit reveal where it was kind of a mic drop thing where she said, hey, look, we got, we fixed malleability, we increased the block size, and it's a soft fork, and it has all these amazing properties, like done, problem solved. And I was sitting next to Joseph actually, and he was like, this is great. I'm like, yeah, but oh, this is going to be a mess. And people were like, what are you talking about? This is awesome. I'm like, yeah, but the way he said it, like, it sort of seems like here's this guy works at Blockstream. But then again, Sipa is like the nicest, like smartest guy. He's like the biggest asset to Bitcoin development, I think. And he was like really excited about it. He was just like, this is amazing. We figured out the best way to do it. And I do think that it is the best way to do it. But the way it was sort of like, oh, we figured it out, guys. All done. Like, conference is over. And it was like on the first day in the morning. And so everyone else there, I think, who made it, Roger Ver was there. All these people probably felt like, what the heck? This guy just like thinks he solved it. I didn't even get to talk. Like we didn't even go through anything. And all the sort of core developers are like, oh, okay, we're done. And I think that was like one of the real things that divided people.
Wow.
And I don't know how you stop that, right? It's especially when you're like, hey, we figured it out. Great, we got it. And it's like just politics and stuff. So yeah, it's weird right now, but I hope that eventually people can work together. I don't know.
Next up, I talked to Tadge further about the limitations of the Lightning Network and some of the things that it could be useful for. But before that, I do have a message from my show sponsors. So, Dropbit, my new sponsor, have you checked them out yet? Have you downloaded the app? It's really awesome. I'm loving it. Absolutely love what they're doing. Also, building a really great relationship with them already. Speaking regularly, discussing ideas about how we can provide education and stuff on my website. And they are also going to be sponsoring my event in New York for Blockchain Week. So keep an eye out for that. So, yeah, I love the app. I've got to say, I've been using it regularly now. I did an initial competition where I sent out $100 to 10 people, but I've used it a couple of times since, actually. I think, do you know why? It's because the UX is amazing. It's so easy to use. If you want to send someone some Bitcoin, you just scan a code or paste an address, or you can select from your contacts. And I know they're doing some other cool things there soon because they just want to make it really easy for people to send Bitcoin to each other. Create this utility where people are using Bitcoin more regularly. And I think that's super cool. But most of all, it's the UX. The UX of the app is utterly amazing. It's the best app I've used. I really love it. You should definitely check it out. You should definitely download it. I'll be doing some more giveaways, sending some more Bitcoin from my Dropbit wallet. If you do want to check it out, it's available on the iPhone and Android. Head over to dropbit.app, which is dropbit.app. That is dropbit.app, which is dropbit.app. And BlockFi, again, as I said earlier, I've signed up to one of their interest accounts. I've put 20% of my Bitcoin in. They've announced they've got over 53 million of client crypto under management. They've also announced that they've done their first payouts. You know, it seems to be working very well for them. They seem to have a lot of happy customers who are making some nice interest on their Bitcoin. And look, I said before, I understand people's concern. You know, Bitcoin is always about owning your private keys. And if it's not your keys, it's not your Bitcoin. But they're a financial product and they offer a service. And I've checked the business out. I understand what they're up to. I trust them. And I trust having 20% of my Bitcoin in there to earn interest. Now, I'm not telling you to do the same. Definitely do your own research. 20% of my Bitcoin isn't actually that much anyway. But for me, it's nice. It's nice to get some interest. And I'm really happy to be working with them. If you do want to check it out, head over to blockfi.com, which is blockfi.com. That is blockfi.com, blockfi.com. So I kind of put out a tweet storm recently. At risk, I kind of said the shouting at each other isn't working. It's just not working. Bitcoin Cash is not going to go away. They're not giving up. And despite everything you think, they're not going to go away. I think it would be a net benefit to all to stop arguing and let people work on their own chains. And one of the reasons I kind of thought about that is, I've never really talked about this, but I kind of went down the Bitcoin maximalism path once, kind of got there and didn't feel comfortable. And then also got to that point where I was thinking, well, perhaps this can't scale. There's an impossibility to scale in the way people want, where it's billions of people can use it and it's affordable.
Yeah, that's hard.
Yeah, it is. So I kind of imagined, well, do we have a scenario where we have multiple currencies? And the reason we have multiple currencies is we have ones that kind of take the stress off the main chain. So you have a Bitcoin or you have another Bitcoin, say Bitcoin Cash, which has a different bunch of users. And is that such a bad scenario? Do we have to have one cryptocurrency?
Yeah, I think it's sort of like, yes, it would be better if you could have one that supports everything and everyone uses it, because that's a lot less sort of friction. And to me, the whole point of money is taking sort of an n squared problem and making it into an O of n problem, where if you've got a million different kinds of money, and we sort of saw this with all these ICOs, it's like, this is money for taxi rides. And it's like, well, I don't want to have money for taxi rides, right? The whole point of money is that I can trade hamburgers for money and then money for taxi rides. And I don't have to barter with burgers for taxi rides, which would happen, if every different asset in the world has its own currency associated with it, we're basically right back to barter.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, and taking that to the extreme, one currency for everything is very efficient in that sense. But yeah, I don't know if we're going to get there. It seems, I think there's even bigger incentive reasons why that's not happening, in that, you can work on Bitcoin, and I think it's really fun and it's cool. And hey, MIT does pay me to work on Bitcoin, which is cool, but it's not like ICO money, So, and that's why we see so many of these ICOs and stuff where people make new currencies, because then they get rich. And you don't really get rich coming on to work on Bitcoin. I think it's sort of a problem. And like, even where I work, a lot of our funding comes from rich guys, people who have a lot of Bitcoin or companies and stuff. And it's it's not like it's an unsustainable funding model. Like there's things that have been like this for a long time, but it's a big difference between that and like a regular startup or a for-profit company.
Yeah.
So it's like the general open source sort of funding problem where, you have billions of dollars riding on OpenSSL and it's like one guy in Germany making it work or something. So
okay, just back to Lightning. Have you looked much at Dan Robinson's critique of Lightning?
Dan Robbins, yeah. He had that like HDLCs considered harmful talk.
Yeah.
But I mean, yes, like many of his criticisms are true. I don't think that let's just not use HDLCs at all is a real solution.
Right.
So yes, but I've talked to him, and many of the things he says are like, yes, these are problems. So I agree with a lot of that. I don't necessarily agree with his solutions.
Right. So you don't agree with the packetized payments, the Interledger thing?
His idea of just sort of send it optimistically and then send it optimistically and hope it doesn't go bad. And then when it does go bad, well, you're only out that little part. That can work for some things, but I think there's a lot of issues with it. So for any kind of larger payments or his like Rainbow Network thing where, you don't really have a third party oracle, and then any kind of volatile asset, as soon as there's a big dislocation, one party just disappears. So I have another paper called Discrete Log Contracts, which builds off of Lightning, and actually a lot of the Lightning design was when I was thinking about how to do these smart contracts, because I remember talking to people in Ethereum and I'm like, wait, can't Bitcoin do a lot of that? So Discrete Log Contracts uses channels, does not use HDLCs, but uses the same channel structure to have like derivatives or smart contracts, I guess, between different assets. And you need a third party oracle. And the nice thing is the oracle has no idea the contract's happening and stuff. But yeah, if you have these sort of, I'll trust you for a little bit, there are cases where that works, but then there's a lot of problems with accountability, especially like multi-hop HDLCs style things. When you're just saying, oh, I'll optimistically send a little bit and hope it gets there. To get accountability is very difficult in that kind of scenario.
All right. Well, let's take a look at Lightning. So it is out there. It's in the wild. It's being used. You've obviously seen the work. You've obviously had a play with it. What's your general view on it? As you look at the network now, what are you impressed by? What are you concerned by yourself?
I think it's still sort of, it's on mainnet, but it still feels a little testnet like, in that it's not people using it for real transactions. They're not buying they're not buying goods on Newegg or whatever. It's still mostly playing around, which makes total sense. I hope that the next sort of phase of adoption is that exchanges will start using this. I don't know if they will, but it would be really cool, and I think a lot safer if Coinbase, Gemini, Kraken, whatever, they're like, hey, we support Lightning. We don't even necessarily support routing and things like that, but you can open a channel with us. You can send payments to us very quickly, and you can even make it like pretty easy UI wise, where it's like a meta withdraw, where you're like, look, you open a channel with us and you can then deposit and withdraw to us instantly. So when you're done trading for the day, take all your money back onto your side of the channel, and we don't consider that your deposit with us. And then when you're go to start trading, you deposit it or something. So I think that would be really useful for a lot of people, because right now one of the big problems in Bitcoin is like there's so much Bitcoin on these exchanges, and you talk to people and they're just like, yeah, I have a lot of Bitcoin, and they've never installed any software, they've never downloaded a block, they don't have a private key, they just use exchanges. So getting from that to, okay, at least they have a channel, and then it may be SPV like or something, but I think that would be a big improvement. I hope to see that, but we'll see.
So single channels, you're kind of a big fan.
Oh, there's many of the problems are from doing multi-hop payments. A lot of the difficulty and complexity is that when you only do a single channel, so many things get so much easier, but much less functionality, right? Like the Lightning Network, you want to be able to say, yeah, we can do these routed payments. They're much more powerful, but that's at the cost of complexity and in some cases a lot of security and sort of trust-like issues. But if you're just like, hey, I'm connecting my exchange, I don't even care about multi-hop, I just want to quickly deposit and withdraw, that's like a solved problem.
Cool. Okay, so if you were going to go back then and redesign the white paper and you were in control, what are the main changes you would make? I know, big question.
I wonder sometimes if we just never mentioned fees at all, if you could just sort of like be like, oh, there's no fees in Lightning. I don't know, and that might like stick because the idea of fees, and I think that was a little tricky, is that people think, oh, I'm going to run a Lightning node and make a bunch of money off of like routing payments and taking fees, and I don't know how that's going to work. I don't think it will. And it might be just like you don't have fees, and there's a little bit of altruism, but it's tiny, and like the way BitTorrent works, where like there's no fees, nobody makes any money, but somehow you can download all the movies for free. So yeah, but other than that, like we wrote what we could do at the time. So there are definitely things that have changed in the actual opcodes used, and I don't think there was anything about watchtowers, things like that. But the general idea, like, yeah, it was okay. And even today, it's like not super clear how to easily improve on it. There's definitely other constructions. There's L2. There's other types of adapter signatures and stuff, and those are really cool and potentially more powerful, but they're also complex. So I think part of it is like keep it simple and then sort of build complexity. And if you start everything, it gets really hard to build.
Well, that was a thing. So when I caught up with Christian Decker again, we talked about how they're going to solve some of the problems. And we talked about L2, and he talked about watchtowers, he talked about splicing, he talked about channel factories. And I'm not a technical person, but when he was talking through this, I was just kind of like, huh?
Oh, yeah. Some of the stuff is really complex. And even the people working on it, when we're in Australia, it's like, oh, man, this... like so it's not that it's not doable, right? It's just that it might not be. It's a really complex problem, and like, yeah, this world has lots of complex solutions. We're talking on a computer right now that's got like 20 nanometer little, like, it's doable, but that's taken thousands and thousands of people doing all this research. So some of these things, as they get more complex, need a lot more resources and time and effort to do, and so that's what I sort of, if it were up to me, I'd be like, okay, start with the simplest part and then sort of try to build out, because there is the tendency, even on the stuff I do and the stuff everyone here does, is that you want to work on the cool hard cryptography kind of projects, and then refining something that is not actually that interesting. It's like, oh, well, we know how to do that. That's just an implementation thing. But actually refining it and getting it, really working well and people using it, it's harder to get people excited about that sometimes.
Do you think it's almost like people feel they've gone too far now, that they can't step back and go, okay, I think we've kind of screwed up, we've got too complicated, we need to step back, we need to simplify this? Do you think it's too difficult to do that?
No, I don't think so, because a lot of the really complex stuff has not made it into any of the implementations. It's still sort of testing. So the current implementation with HDLC and stuff, I think it's definitely tractable, and that can be refined and made better. Some of the more complex stuff going forward, yeah, it's tricky. But I think try it out. Like people are developing it, so that's good.
This wasn't the call I expected, Tadge. I don't know why, but I expected a very pro Lightning, this is what's happening, here are the solutions to the problems, but I feel a sense of dejection from you.
Well, so I do want to make clear that, like, I think it's really cool. I want people to use it. I want people to research it and develop this stuff. I think it's a really great solution for a lot of problems. But I've seen like sort of a weird tribal, like everyone's like, oh, Lightning is going to be the best thing ever. It's like, wait, I can't actually do that. So that's why I'm sort of hedging, in that, like, I think it's a part of a scaling solution, but I think there's other stuff, and the stuff I'm working on now is like a totally different way to help scaling.
So what's the timeline for this thing you're working
on? So the code is out. I need to get this paper finished, hopefully in the next couple days, and then get it on ePrint or something. And then get a wallet working with it. I hope to be able to do that sometime this summer. First on testnet, but it shouldn't be too bad, because most of the code, most of the sort of tricky part and novel part of the code is out there, and it's on GitHub, and people are looking at it, and programming with it and stuff.
Sorry, just to understand, because again, I said to you, I'm not the most technical. Does it optimize block space?
It's hard. Okay. It actually makes blocks bigger.
Okay.
So if you have a, 1 megabyte block, it retroactively, it adds these proofs onto that block. So now the block is a little over, it's, 1.3 megabytes or something, which is, bad in a sense because it's bigger. But what it does is it means you don't have to store any of this stuff. So right now in Bitcoin, people can do pruning. So you have to download 240 gigabytes or so, and by default it stores those 240 gigabytes, but you don't have to. You can go into config and say pruning equals 5,000 or whatever, and then you throw away all the old blocks and you just keep the current state of the system. So that is somewhat used. And then this is sort of an even more powerful version of that, where you say, I'm actually throwing away all the old blocks and I'm throwing away the entire state of the system. I'm just keeping this like 1 kilobyte little image of the system. And that's enough that I can verify everything. So you'll be able to run, sort of the cliche, like you can run a full node on a Raspberry Pi. Well, actually, in this case, you probably can. It in many cases, when you're running a full node, the bottleneck is your hard drive, where a block comes in and you've got to read 10,000 different spots on the hard drive, and that takes a long time. This will make it so you get it in over the network and you're all set. Just what's in RAM is enough to verify.
Right.
And so this is a problem, like in Ethereum, it's a huge problem where you cannot run Ethereum on a hard drive, right? You even need like an NVMe SSD because there's so many different disk seeks. So this would help in Ethereum, but it doesn't apply to Ethereum because of the way Ethereum's designed. So actually, which is too bad for them, I guess. But yeah, like maybe some techniques similar to this would be applicable in Ethereum. But it works great in Bitcoin, and so I'm pretty excited about it. I think it's got downsides, but the downsides are fairly limited in that unless your internet connection is really slow, your bottleneck is not download. But then again, I've argued with the people who work on Bitcoin. Like I talked to Greg Maxwell on IRC, and he thinks lots of things are dumb. But like I don't think he didn't say it was dumb, but his goal is reducing bandwidth. And some people think, oh, the problem with Bitcoin is you got all this storage space and you got all this CPU. And other people think, no, the problem is it's downloading too much. So this actually makes the downloading too much worse, but makes the CPU and disk access better. So it depends. Some people are pretty enthusiastic about it that I've talked to. Some people think it's not important or actually it makes things worse. But it's optional. It's not even a soft fork. It's just another thing you can do. So hopefully that, it's another tool to use. I think Lightning is the same way, where it's like, where it's applicable, use it. Where it's not, don't.
What's Gregory's take on Lightning? Because I've never actually spoken to him.
I haven't talked to him much about it. I do remember with when we're doing like the whole Lightning Labs thing and like talking to VCs, I did like go through and try to get all the people's like comments, and Greg did say some good things about it on like IRC or Bitcoin Talk or somewhere. So I remember copying, pasting, and getting like a list of like, see all the people think we're good. So I do vaguely remember him saying positive things, and most of the other developers have too. But the sort of general like Bitcoin Cash versus Bitcoin thing, where Bitcoin Cash people think it's all about Lightning. Most of the core developers have very little interaction with Lightning at all, right? So if you talk to most of the people working on Bitcoin Core, they're like, oh yeah, like okay, Blue Mat is writing a Rust Lightning implementation, so that's but most of them haven't really looked at it, or they're like, yeah, they're sort of aware of it, but aren't really keeping track much.
Well, they're old school Bitcoiners; they can afford the base chain.
Yeah, I mean, I guess. But yeah, fees, who knows?
Yeah, that fee thing is the one thing I've never found a solid answer for. I've wrestled with it again and again. I'll keep speaking to people. The problem I'm coming into is the block subsidy will go, and the block subsidy helps miners secure the network. If the block subsidy goes, it needs replacing by fees. Therefore, it needs either lots of small fees or small big fees, but it's going to rely on that, or we're going to lose security. And I'm yet to find somebody who can give me an answer to that conundrum. And it's kind of like, well, it's 20 years away or 30 years away. We don't have to worry now. But I'm kind of like,
Oh, no, I think that's an important. So there's a paper actually we were talking about the other day here. Bitcoin is unstable without the block reward or something by some people at Princeton. It's 2 years old or so. I have some problems. There's some interesting things in the paper, but I think their premises are sort of messed up in that they assume unlimited block size in their model. And it's like, well, no, wait, that was sort of the whole argument. You can't just assume this and then make the argument. But anyway, but yeah, I think it's a sort of scary thing. And then, and like, we don't have a good idea of how it works long term in the future. The ideal is that, yeah, there's a lot of demand for block space and people pay significant fees, and that's enough to keep the miners running, and that the mining keeps chugging along, with maybe there's an occasional reorg for a few blocks here and there, but long term it works. But like it would be cool to have like a really nice paper sort of analyzing all the different long-term scenarios and getting a good idea of how that can, a good argument for how this can really work, like in a sort of mathematical model. I haven't seen that paper yet. I've seen papers doing the opposite. There's a paper by, I think Eric Budish, I think his name is Eric, and the Nariand and Princeton people. So I've seen papers that are sort of the opposite, saying like, hey, this stuff doesn't work as well without this block subsidy, and that's probably true. But it does. I don't think it's impossible. I think it's quite possible that there is a future where, yeah, we have this sort of constrained block reward, or there are soft fork. People have talked about soft forks where you can make the miners have to do more work as a. There are some talks at Scaling Bitcoin about these kinds of things. So there are ideas, but I don't think we have like a solution of here's how it's going to work.
Have you ever wrestled with the idea that there may be a change where there will be some form of even small but permanent inflation and a permanent subsidy?
Oh yeah, that would be so much easier.
But you're not allowed to talk about it.
From like a programming point of view, it'd be so easy.
But from an economics point of view, you're not allowed to discuss this.
Yeah, well, I mean, personally, I don't. To me personally, the cool part about Bitcoin isn't necessarily there will only be 21 million. If there was a fixed inflation schedule where even if Satoshi just said, look, every block you get 100 Bitcoins forever, that would still be a really cool system. But you can't go back to that, I think. So like I don't, because it's like, yes, the early people get rewarded because there's fewer then, and then the difficulty goes up. Like I think that would still be almost maybe as interesting of a system. Because the properties that to me are interesting about Bitcoin are that it's kind of permissionless and sort of anonymous, and you get this privacy, and it, that's kind of cool. The like hard money, okay, there's never going to be more than this. It's not, I don't know, semi-deflationary kind of thing. That's okay. I have no real problem with it. So if you can get it to work technically, sure, cool. Like, but it makes it harder from a technical point of view. and it's Satoshi made the software, disappeared. And everyone else has to deal with this, 40-year problem. He doesn't.
Well, so. He's back because he's suing me.
Oh, right. So, yeah.
When I spoke to Peter Todd, he said, if you can't handle, say, a 1% inflation annually, what's wrong with your life? And I would prefer 21 million, but does the thought of inflation scare me? It doesn't. Does the thought of trying to talk about it scary? Yes, it does.
There's the idea is that you don't want to pull the rug out from under people, and this is why hard forks. A lot of the people, a lot of the core developers don't like the idea of hard forks. They think it's bad. Like technically, there have been hard forks, and there was one in October. From a technical point of view,
was there?
Yeah. So there's this bug,
the CVE bug.
Yeah, technically a hard fork.
Really? Well, this is the first time I've heard this.
It was not exploited, right? So there's no chain split. But when that bug was introduced, that was, the software with the bug would accept blocks that would not have been accepted by previous software, which from a, letter reading of the definition of hard fork, that's a hard fork, was then a soft fork fixing the bug. Whatever. So it was an unintentional. I don't think there's been an intentional hard fork, but there have been, I guess, 2-ish unintentional ones that in retrospect are like, oh, that was technically a hard fork. But it wasn't exploited. It wasn't like, of course. But so I do agree that like trying to sort of pull the rug out from under people, and like people have definitely bought into there's only 21 million. And so you really don't want to change that. That I would say you can't change that without calling it something else. It's not necessarily Bitcoin at that point. If, on the other hand, it's not a stable system and we can't make it work, maybe call it Bitcoin 2, maybe call it Bitcoin inflation, whatever, but say, okay, we've got this, it's a hard fork. It's a different coin, but it has some, one coin per block indefinite inflation, but it works better. And, that's the best we could do. Hopefully we can make it work with the 21 million limit. It's not a subject of intense research because people have been like, yeah, this is a problem we have to deal with, 10, 20, 30 years from now. But I think it would be cool to look at and see if we can make it work.
Well, I think another thing that prevents it being discussed or people aren't keen on is it affects the value of their Bitcoin, the Bitcoin they're holding. If Bitcoin was changed to have some kind of inflation, it would devalue their Bitcoin. And I guess there are a lot of people who have very strong opinions and have a voice who hold a lot of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I to some extent I agree, but at the same time, I think the uncertainty, I guess the issue is there's a lot of people who buy Bitcoin and value Bitcoin and they don't know about all the uncertainty about all the long-term, about all the problems. So like, wait, the idea like, okay, we've got it all solved, but all the people working on it, like, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't have solutions for these things. So if you talk and same with Lightning, like you go to, at the Australia meeting with Rusty and all the people working on Lightning, it's like, oh yeah, we need to figure this out. Right. Or the core developer meetups that we have. And there's one in, Amsterdam in a month or two. And there's all these things where like, yeah, we got to figure that out. So it's not like these are solved problems. They're still open questions. And I think if we do solve it, either way, if someone comes out with a paper, hey, maybe I'll work on it in a year or two. Here's why it really can't work with just a fee model. Here are these inherent instabilities. Or on the other hand, here's how you can make it work. Here are the, scenarios where, yeah, it can work, fixed issuance, goes to zero and just fees, and it's sustainable and it's stable because of this. I think that would be really useful to know one way or another, to have better research on that stuff.
All right, man. Well, listen, I'm conscious of your time and we started a little late. Just to finish off, for you in Bitcoin right now, what are the most important things you think are being worked on and most important things that you want to see solved?
So short term, I think Taproot and the Schnorr signature stuff, getting that in would be really cool. And it'd also be really it'd give me people a good idea because then you can do a soft fork again. Like we haven't done one for 2 years, and it's sort of, getting that in would be like, oh, cool. We can still make some soft fork progress on these things. And I think privacy is one that I'm not personally doing a lot of research on, but I hope for there to be better privacy technologies that can get implemented in Bitcoin. There's cool research going on with Mimblewimble, Zcash, things like that. But Bitcoin itself, I think it would be really cool to see improved privacy things. It's not my focus, but I talk to people a lot. So Madars, who works on Zcash, he's also at the DCI, and we talk about stuff like that. So hopefully there's that's an interesting another research area.
All right, man. Well, look, this was an amazing way to do my 100th episode. How can people keep an eye on your work and monitor what you're doing?
So there's GitHub, like github.com/MIT-DCI. The Utreexo code is in there, and some people have been looking at it. It's pretty ugly, and so I want to sort of clean it up and make it so that people can test it out. And some other students at different universities have been looking at it and stuff. So there's that. It's not super easy to read. But and then I'll have the paper out soon, and there's a video from the Bitcoin Expo. So if people are interested in that, cool, and talk to me about it. And then the DCI in general, there's a lot of people, not a ton of people. It's 6 or 7 people, but doing cool research on this stuff. And if you're in Boston, swing by. We're friendly.
Okay, so how was that? That was definitely not the show I expected. And I don't know why. I don't know what my expectations were, but it wasn't the show I expected. And we kind of went off tangent on all the topics I had prepared. And the funny thing about this Lightning month is the more I've learned, the more I'm excited about it, but the more questions I have, things I haven't found solid answers for, or things about Lightning which I'm not too sure about. And it was really interesting to talk to Tadge and hear him echo some of these points and points out some of the limitations himself. I too don't think Lightning is going to be the big savior of Bitcoin, or, does it even need saving? I mean, I'm a regular user of the base chain. It suits me, it suits my business, it suits what I need it for. But I do have some things about the future I'm wrestling with. How a miner is going to be rewarded when the block subsidy drops and ends. Will on-chain fees price people out of Bitcoin? Will it become a two-tier network? How do on-chain fees affect Lightning? And with the Lightning, I've got questions around HDLCs and locked-in liquidity and routing these multi-hop payments. There are a bunch of things that I don't think are answered yet, or I don't have solid answers myself. And I'm sorry if this annoys people, and I'm sorry if I should just believe in Lightning. But no, there are some questions I have, and that has led me to have some sympathy with people who are proponents of on-chain scaling, and I understand the arguments and why people are against that, and I'm not becoming a big blocker, and I'm not buying Bitcoin Cash. I think it's a weak argument just to say they're all scammers and they're all technically incompetent and they don't understand economics. I just don't believe that is the right way to answer it. And I think potentially it's time to kind of quell the arguments and try and explore some of these other things. Now, I definitely expect a bunch of people are going to hate this, and that's cool, so be it. But I'm exploring this out of a natural curiosity. So I'd be really interested to see if anyone else feels the same. I'd be really interested to see if people agree or disagree. I'm, happy to listen to all points. I'm happy to do future shows discussing this. But yeah, this is where I'm at with it. 100 shows in. So yeah, definitely looking forward to feedback on this one. And listen, I just want to say another massive thank you to everyone who supported the show since I've done this. Like I said, 100 shows in. I couldn't have done it without the support of so many people. And everyone, from people who listen to the show, leave me reviews on iTunes, to my sponsors. Everyone who supports the show makes this happen. So thank you so much. And if you do want to support the show, I'm going to rattle through the things you can do. Firstly, listen to the sponsors. I've seen some people complain about this, say, oh, your intro's too long, it takes 4 minutes. Look, if you don't like it, just skip it. I mean, it would take you like 10 seconds to skip it. But if you want to support the show, then listen to those 4 minutes, because they're useful for me to get my point across, and they're great for the sponsors. If you don't want to listen to the sponsors, but you do want to support the show, then become a patron for $5 a month. You can get the show early and without ads. That's at patreon.com/whatbitcoindid. I've got 93 now. Be nice to get to 100 at some point. If you don't want to use Patreon, you can subscribe with crypto. Just drop me an email. I'll send you a deposit address and I'll add you to the distribution list. If you can't afford it and you just want it, just drop me an email. I'll probably give it to you anyway. I'm accepting Lightning payments by tipping.me, so you can use that now. You can become a show sponsor. I mean, I don't really have any spaces left, but yeah, if you want to become a show sponsor, maybe I can work something out. Drop me an email on hello@whatbitcoindid.com. Looks like I'm going to go through 200,000 downloads again this month, which is super cool. If you leave me a review on iTunes or click on the subscribe button, both help with my ranking. You can follow me on social media. I'm at whatbitcoindid on everything, at Peter McCormack on Twitter. You can check out my website. That's whatbitcoindid.com. Needs to do lots more work on that. You can sign up to my newsletter, and you can share this out with your friends and family. Anyone who's done anything, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. Lightning month's coming to a close soon. I've got a few more interviews lined up, so I'll get them out before the end of the month. And I've got a couple of other bonus interviews coming up, just other things that I needed to cover. Anyway, I've spoken enough. If you want to reach out to me, my email address is hello@whatbitcoindid.com, and I look forward to hearing from you.